Michael, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
This is Auto Collabs.
What is the? No, I'm not gonna. I was gonna ask you what is the worst. I was gonna ask him what is the worst HR situation he's ever been in the middle of. But I have a feeling that's probably the kind of thing you don't talk about.
That's wrong. You don't talk about the worst HR situation.
Breaking up fist fights in Sunday school at church. There's no HR guidebook for that.
There's no book for that right there.
Well, can you tell us what it was over?
There were
the flannel graph.
I was living in Vancouver, Canada. My assignment was I was a youth pastor. I taught Sunday school for 12 and 13-year-olds. And this particular Sunday, these two girls were going bickering, like you're the one that, and I'd be like, okay, come on.
Was this a fist fight between two girls?
Cut it out, and come on, guys, cut it out. I turn around to the chalkboard and I start writing something because we kind of got them to settle. I turn around to the chalkboard. To write something, like a Bible passage for them to look up or something. And I hear these chairs, those metal folding chairs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I turn around and these two girls, and I didn't know what else to do. So I put my hand in one of their face, like the Heisman Trophy. And I don't know how it happened, but the other girl was in a headlock, and they were both like this, and I was like this, and I'm like, knock it! What is happening?
That feels like a Nacho Libre moment, honestly.
Just as a note for all of the listeners, this
gotta
HR
watch the
policy not approved for workplace environments.
No.
This is the What Not to Do podcast, which is why we have an expert today.
Yes,
that's right. We do have an expert. Her name is Bethany Sobczak. I believe I got that right.
I think you got it right.
And Bethany is an Automotive News 40 under 40 winner this year. So we're excited. It's a bit of a mini series that we're doing with a bunch of these winners because, hey, look, we should be talking to these people because they're obviously doing really great work in the dirt, on the ground, in real dealerships. And so we really hope you enjoy the actual professional opinion, not the headlock, face palm
stiff arm
opinion
headlock
on HR with Bethany. Enjoy this conversation. All right, Bethany, thank you so much for joining us for a little conversation today here.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
All right, I'm going to go right in because a lot of people enter the car business and they kind of like work into their careers, and then they're like, fine, I find the car business. But we found out that you found the car business right out of high school. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right, tell us how that happened, and then we'll get into it.
Well, I was looking for a job that was not in fast food or, not the typical teenager thing out of high school. And I just so happened to come across an ad for car sales. And I was like, you want to know what? What the heck? That sounds like fun. I'm an HR person I'm a car guy trapped in an HR person's body, Like, I love cars. My whole life, car family. So I walked into the dealership. I met with the general manager for all of 30 minutes. And he's like, she's great. I love her. Gotta have her. Get her on the floor. No training at all. Just
that sounds about right.
No training?
I know. Everyone's shocked. Get her out on the floor. And I was kind of a natural at it. I love people. I was able to adapt my personality to the different types of customers that we had. And I ended up, having pretty early success. Ended up averaging 15 to 20 cars a month by like month 3. So it was awesome.
Whoa.
Let's go. So now you've gone all the way from, getting out of high school, getting in the car business to now having the distinction of Automotive News 40 under 40 winner this year, which congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So cool. What along the way have been the shaping things to move you from, you said, I'm a car guy trapped in an HR body or something like that. I think you said, like, what do you think have maybe been a couple of the defining moments that have led you to start to track toward that type of role?
So being in car sales was my absolute favorite job to this day I've ever had in my life. But at the time, it just was not super woman friendly, I suppose. I was a new mom, I was a new wife, and the hours just did not align with having a new family. So I decided to, trend towards HR. That was what I was working on my education in. I got a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. In the white collar corporate world, it was very buttoned up. It was very strict. But, it paid the bills. It was great. I kind of found a niche in getting to make positive impacts on people's lives at work. My biggest thing was, if you can work with me on a daily basis and you can walk away from the conversation saying either that wasn't so bad or, talking to you made my day a little bit better. That's all I try to do. However, the corporate world was super boring. It was not automotive. It wasn't automotive.
Your first day was a lot different at the HR job. You did get training, however. I'm sure they gave you training.
But I will tell you, it was so stale. And Automotive called to me like the ocean calls to Moana.
Yes, I'm so happy you just made that reference. Are you excited for Moana 2?
Of course I'm excited for Moana 2. My kids think I'm taking them to go see it, but I'm really taking me to go see it. So.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, so I ended up getting a call from Coons. I still maintained, a lot of my contacts in the HR or in the automotive world. And they hit me up and was like, hey, we need somebody to take over our HR department here. I'm like, you guys are pretty big. And after my first meeting,
what was the size of the organization when they called?
Between 4,000 and 5,000 people.
A couple.
Yeah,
you're like, and you're going to put me in charge of this?
Have you met me? Are you sure? So I ended up meeting with Mr. O'Connell, who's their president over there. And he was wonderful. Absolutely great group of guys to this day. Best in the business in some aspects. But they were like, hey, we want you to take it over. We think you're great. We think you can do it. And I'm like, at this point, even I was questioning myself. I was like, this is a big task, guys. And they were like, well, if we believe in you, why don't you believe in you? And I was like, well, that's a fair point. Let's do it. Let's go. Wow.
Car business for the win.
Exactly. Different culture, right?
Yeah.
So I took it over and I knocked it out of the park. And then from there, I met Rob Smith here at Fitzgerald and Mr. Fitzgerald. And, they really sold me on the concept of having a people-centric culture, as well as employee ownership. So that's when I made the jump, and been the best thing I've ever done to date.
So the employee, let me drill in the employee ownership thing, because that was a pretty recent transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
How recently did it flip?
We closed on it in February of 2023.
Okay, so just a little over a year.
Mm-hmm.
And you were part of that transition.
Yes, sir.
You're probably a really big component. Talk about that, because I think ESOPs, the conversation in automotive has definitely been on the increase from that's an anecdotal perception, just like the way I see it and hear it. And obviously we're good friends, and Liza Myers-Borges is a great friend and friend of ASOTU. So like sometimes I feel like we feel like it's a bigger piece of the organization, but then I've heard it a few other places. Hearing it from you, talk about that transition. Like, why did they decide to do that, and how's it worked out?
So, like a lot of groups, we didn't have a solid succession plan in place as far as who was going to take over. And as you guys know, the big dogs are out there eating right now. They're eating up everybody. Mr. Fitzgerald, he's pretty much a legend in the industry. He's not new to this. He's been true to this since 1966. And he wanted to preserve his philosophy on the auto business, which is transparency and trust. So he was at the forefront of making pricing transparency to customers. He's been doing it for decades and decades at this point. And he did not want that to be eaten alive by another group swooping in and buying us out. So he said, to me, the best way to preserve my legacy and to preserve the culture that we've created at the company is to sell it back to the employees. So that's what we did. And he didn't go just halfway. I know a lot of the other groups are not 100% employee owned. I think we might be the only one that is 100% employee owned.
Wow.
So yeah, we made that transition. It has been phenomenal. I wouldn't say we're perfect at it. Obviously, we're a year in. We're still learning every day. But the shift in culture that it's changed has been phenomenal.
Explain that. Really? Like, what are some of the shifts? Like you say, the shift in culture has been, you already had a great culture, and you're saying there's been another shift. What's the shift?
So at the start of the ESOP, our shares were worth X amount of dollars. Okay. One of the points of the ESOP was that employees now need to gain the ownership mentality. So they need to come in here and they need to realize that the people who are working beside of them every single day, you guys are all now not only related or partners with them on the operational sense, but you're also partners with them financially. So their success affects your success and vice versa. Every single ounce of effort, whether it's me, whether it's a detail support staff, whoever that is, it makes the difference to every single person in this organization. So knowing that you have to rely on the person beside you to be financially successful really created a shift of, I guess, exuding that discretionary effort from employees that maybe wouldn't have been there before. So just in the past year, our share value has doubled, close to tripled. And we're about to release that to the associates within the coming months. So that's going to be a really big, it's going to be a really big thing for them. But we're excited about it.
How do you manage ego in this ecosystem, right? Like, and I don't want to sound like the negative Nancy here, because that's not the intention, but it's the car business, right? We're known to like have an ego or two somewhere in an organization
per person.
Yeah. See? Look at that. We even offended Kyle.
He's gone. He's like, fine. Like, yes, we were.
We were talking about you, Kyle.
Yeah. If you think we're talking about you and you're offended, that's because we were talking about you, Kyle.
How do you guys manage that across the board? Like making sure expectations are there where people don't, have that bravado of, like so-and-so's not pulling their weight. And if I was a owner, I would have never hired that person. Like, how do you navigate that in this ecosystem?
That's a fantastic question. And I think you guys are correct that in the automotive business, there's always going to be ego. I don't care what company you go to, there's ego. And quite frankly, I think the ego can work to our benefit to some degree. I think it's great when salespeople have a bit of an ego about them, right? They go about their day to day like, I'm the best to ever do it. I'm confident and I know what I'm talking about and I'm going to close this deal. But I wouldn't say we have a tremendous amount of people who would look at the person next to them and say, you're not pulling your weight. You need to be doing more. It's very rare that I get circumstances like that. So I just don't see it as a problem here.
Have you always seen the silver lining in everything?
Yeah. She's like, ego? Great. Bring it on.
But it is. I think it's such a critical piece. I mean, I was having a conversation this morning with a team member about the importance of mindset, how really mindset is the foundation of one's definition of success, or it could be the reason you catapult to higher levels of success. And the way I basically explained it was like a dragon could come out of the clouds and destroy everything around you. And your mindset needs to be such that you see the opportunity amidst all of it. Right. And it sounds like, I mean, just the way you responded to that question, even with a smile on your face, I'm like, okay, has this optimism always been a part of who you are? Or is that something that developed organically that looking back in hindsight, you've developed within yourself?
I certainly wouldn't say it's always been who I am. But when I got into human resources, I recognized that a lot of what I have to do is not good news, especially in large organizations. When people see me, a lot of times it's not for great reasons. And I didn't like to have the perception of I'm the Grim Reaper when I walk in the door. I don't want people to look at me and be like, oh God, Bethany's here. Like everyone hide.
Don't look with a piece of paper and they like dive under their desk.
Yeah, right. Like I'm Medusa.
I'm about to read something to you.
Yeah. Oh, no.
But it more so became, I realized I'm going to have to relay a lot of bad information a lot of times. And if I can develop a way to put a positive spin on that and help people walk away from the conversation, recognizing that it's not so bad. the velvet hammer is what I've been referred to.
The old velvet hammer.
It's
velvet
like,
hammer.
hey, you can't be here anymore, but on the positive side, you can sleep in tomorrow.
Great news.
Great news.
Great news, your ESOP benefits being paid out a lot sooner than you thought. Yay!
Oh, it just isn't vested yet. No. So before the podcast started, we started having this conversation about HR needing a rebrand, right? And you were going to start to talk about that, and then we're like, stop talking about it because we want to talk about it on the podcast. So when you think of how people perceive HR and then the difference between what it actually is on the inside, how you view the role, like what is the rebrand that is needed? What should people know about HR and how should they lean into it?
So as I said earlier, pre-show, I do not think that the brand we have been given is unearned. I do think a lot of us have...
Sounds familiar.
I believe a lot of this is kind of put it on ourselves. Because a lot of us we've put our own self into a box of, it's all about procedure, it's all about policy, there's no gray area, we're just here to fire. It's always such a negative cloud around us. And one of my missions has been to show people that, hey, we are not so bad. Like, we can actually be really fun. Believe it or not, we can be fun. You don't have to mince every single word around us. There is gray area that we learn to operate in, and we can be strategic and positive partners, and not just here to fire people or to write people up or whatever that looks like. But being in HR for about 10 years now, I've been to enough conferences, I've met enough people that I'm like, wow, now I see why people are like, oh God, HR. Like, it's a bit stiff. It's a bit stiff. So I want people to recognize that, especially in this particular industry in HR, you have to be loose. You have to be willing to go with the flow. The way we communicate with each other here is very different than how we communicate with each other, in a more white collar setting. But it is so much more fun here. Automotive is the best industry to ever be in HR because you can be yourself. That's the biggest thing. You can be yourself.
I feel like I need therapy right now.
Do you know the team at Walser?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Do you know who Claude Silver is?
I don't know who that is.
Oh, we're going to make you some intros because, like,
what other names
people that you should know is kind of my whole thought here.
Do you know Victor Borg or Bing Crosby? Just like throwing random names.
These aren't random, Michael.
I can't believe you don't know this random person I know.
Okay, therapy session. What you just touched on. Hold on, I need to lay down for this. What you just touched on is probably why I think I'm awful at the HR side of things, because, for example, I think it's bitten me in the butt when I've tried to be like too kind or too nice or too whatever in the way that because like I always want to soften the blow. You know what I mean? To the degree that there have been enough occasions where it's like been exploited right on the backside.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's caused problems for me. So like from your perspective and keeping it loose and fun and human and like re-injecting a soul back into this field or this discipline, how do you do that? For those that are listening and curious, how do you do that in a way that you're also protected, right? Obviously, everybody goes to extremes, and the way they protect themselves is policy and procedure and say this and don't say that and never. So how do you balance that?
So I think first and foremost, it comes from keeping an open mind. So when we're talking to people and we go into these investigations, it's recognizing that people are flawed. From myself to support staff to managers, people are flawed. And I think at the end of the day, it's recognizing that innately most people are trying to be good people and they're trying to do the right thing. Whether or not it turns out perfect is another scenario. But I have always had a massive amount of leniency if a manager calls me and they're like, hey, Bethany, I just fired somebody. And I think I said this that might get us in trouble. Or my favorite is the hypothetical. Hey,
what would you say if
hypothetically, what if I said this to somebody when firing them? And I'm like, did it happen? Just hypothetically,
asking
did
for
it
a friend
happen and with who? Just tell me so we can
I'm gonna find out anyway, right?
So we can get this squared away. We can start planning. Just let me know. But it really does come from recognizing that people are human, people make mistakes, and they really are trying to be good people at the end of the day. I will always, always, always err on the side of protecting somebody who is trying to be a good person. One of my first questions I ask when people call me, and they're like, hey, Bethany, I have this person and I want to let them go for X reason. I said, okay, what could be the legal ramifications of that? I'm like, before we get into the legal ramifications, is this something a good person would do? Is this something, are you thinking about the employee right now, or are you thinking about yourself? Let's answer that question. And when you can provide me with that answer, then we can go down the legal ramifications rabbit hole. And we usually don't have to get down to the legal ramifications rabbit hole, because it's just
once you get there, you're losing.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just making them pause and reflect on, okay, am I making the best decision for somebody else and for the company, or is this something I'm being selfish about?
When does your book come out?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do like The Office, but like the dealership. This place is it would be the best show. Nobody
really
understands.
Would be. I've heard something about that. Hey, I've one last question because we're almost out of time here. A lot of the things that we just talked about in HR, and I think by nature, whenever there are legalities involved, you tend to be reactive, right, to situations, right? When an HR situation happens, right, like you just said, like, I have questions to ask, talking about ramifications, we're going to react to what just happened. What are one or two things that HR directors in automotive, very similar scenarios, what are one or two things they can do that are proactive, that kind of minimize the need for reactive?
Well, I mean, our favorite word and something we do so well, training. So you need to be proactive about getting in front of these managers, and more importantly, forming the relationships with them to where they feel like they can come to you and talk to you openly about these things, whether they feel like they've already made a mistake that has led to this situation. Once you show them that you're a safe person, that you can be human and make mistakes with, they will come to you beforehand and get your advice and say, hey, Bethany, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What are your thoughts on this? That is how I have been able to be very proactive in preventing a lot of these situations from happening. But if managers do not feel like they can talk to you and they feel like the information they provide to you is going to be weaponized against them, you will never succeed.
You'll find out at the end.
Yeah, you will never succeed.
Sounds a lot more like loving people more than you love cars. Bethany, congratulations on your 40 under 40. We love seeing HR represented on that list.
Yes.
And thank you for giving us a little bit of your time and your wisdom with us today. Michael is going to go rethink his life.
Well, thank you guys so much. I sincerely enjoyed it, and I look forward to those introductions you're making for me.
Absolutely.
Done.
Can I just
look at the beginning, we were like, this is not the headlock conversation, but apparently she's got her own little way of like headlocking, but not with the actual like physical piece of it, right?
Yes. I was gonna say, I wanted to give you a compliment, Kyle, because it happens so subtly. I mean, if you're listening to the audio version of this, you have to hop over to the YouTube channel, watch the video version of this. The movie Moana comes up. And the level of joy that I see in Kyle's face.
I saw it too.
The joy. This is the compliment. I mean this sincerely. This is only the joy that a girl dad can have.
Last night, I'm not kidding you. My daughter, I'm putting her to bed, my 10-year-old daughter, and she goes, Dad, what's your favorite kid movie? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, animated, like a Disney or something like that movie. And without even hesitating, Moana, period. End of story.
So I can see I can see Kyle just sitting on the couch crying like a little girl during Moana.
every time. The very end of that movie with the thing and the
dad and the heart and the music.
Who
and
you
the
are,
Lin-Manuel Miranda song.
Oh,
crushing in the back.
My boy. Yeah.
I love how you brought up too that the ocean calls to her and she answers, because ironically, I think Moana 2 is now she gets married and never answers her husband's phone calls. I think
oh my goodness.
There's a tie-in somewhere to not answering.
Now it's circling all the way back to something that's going to violate an HR principle somewhere. Right back to the beginning of this episode. Listen, we hope you enjoyed the conversation we had with Bethany. We hope you get to meet her. She's going to be at NADA show because the 40 under 40 get their awards. And it is so fun to see the next generation carrying the torch, loving people more than cars, loving people more than policy. We'll have to get that shirt made for her. But on behalf of Kyle Mountsier, the crying Kyle, Michael Cirillo, the headlocking, stiff arming Michael Cirillo, and myself, thanks for listening to Auto Collabs.
Welcome to Auto Collabs. Why are we recording?
Are we rolling yet?